My best friend unalived himself after being used by our friend group, who then vandalized my house and got me fired when I exposed them. So I played the long game and orchestrated their lives completely imploding. I was 16 when my boy best friend was found dangling from the ceiling, completely unalived. And that's how I spent my New Year's Eve crying at Nick's funeral, wearing a black dress with the tag still on. His mom cornered me right after the service while everyone else was filing out to their cars. She grabbed my shoulders and her nails dug into my skin. "You were his best friend. You should have known. How could you not have known?" Her tone was angry, but her wrinkled brown eyes were filled with suffering. And in that moment, I was grateful that his family hated me, grateful that I could provide them with anger to distract them from how big the pain was, but it made me blame myself more. And for years, I was convinced that I was an unaliver no better than Jeffrey Dahmer. Meanwhile, our class went into attention-seeking overdrive. Clara, a girl he always beached about, started a memorial Instagram page that hit 5,000 followers in 2 days. Max, his childhood bully, organized weekly meetups at the diner where we used to hang out. Megan made matching bracelets with his initials that everyone wore and posted about constantly. They tagged me in everything, and I always commented with dove emojis because if I didn't, they'd beach about me for being a fake friend. Deep down, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't care because the grief was so overwhelming that I couldn't even think about anything else for longer than 5 minutes. At the gatherings, they'd post these long captions about missing him so much, but I tried to grieve offline. They'd shame me. I remember his 1-month anniversary. I wore the jumper that still faintly smelled like him. And when my order came, I was bawling my eyes out. Max just rolled his eyes. Megan patted my back and aggressively told me that it was time to move on. So I went to the bathroom and proceeded to spend 20 minutes curled up into a ball on the floor. The eye came back. The table went silent. I knew they had all been beaching about me, dragging the mood down. After that, I started making excuses. Homework, family stuff, pet minding, anything to avoid the gatherings. And in isolation, the guilt was eating me alive. Anytime I smiled or even enjoyed anything, I hated myself because he would never get to experience joy again, all because of me. And just as I was about to apologize to the group for being a Debbie Downer, I got a text. It was Marcus, one of Nick's co-workers. We hadn't talked since the funeral. He texted saying he noticed I hadn't been around much and wanted to check in. I hadn't received a text like that since the day I found out he was dead. I immediately broke down and told him everything. The forced optimism, the isolation, the guilt, the sewers-lit thoughts. Turns out he'd been feeling the same way, and my friend group had blocked him for not posting enough. I breathed a sigh of relief when he told me that. We started texting every day. It was like he was the only one that got me. Fast forward to 6 months later. The group were planning this huge trip for the anniversary of his death. Clara made a whole itinerary with photo locations and matching outfits. The 2 things that Nick hated most in this world, LOL. When I said I wanted to spend the day alone, Max actually laughed. That's so selfish. This is about honoring him together. But for the time, I didn't listen. Marcus and I decided to visit Nick's grave privately instead. While we were there, I noticed fresh flowers and candles that I'd never seen before. The groundskeeper told me Nick's older brother had been coming weekly, but always alone. He mentioned the brother had left something in the memorial box they keep for families. Inside was a USB drive labeled, "Read this." Well, I already had my laptop in my bag, so I put it in straight away. What I saw made my stomach churn. It was Nick's blog. 2 years of entries, and every single one was about our friend group. How they made fun of his music taste. How they excluded him from plans then posted about missing him when he wasn't there. How they only invited him when they needed rides or someone to pay. Entry after entry of feeling invisible in his own friend group. The anniversary memorial was packed. Clara had promoted it like an event, and half the school showed up. Megan was live streaming. Max was selling these memorial hoodies he'd designed. I walked up to the microphone with my phone in my hand. I read every entry that mentioned them by name. I didn't realize it at the time, but that one decision ruined my life. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's face went from confused to furious in seconds. She stormed up to the microphone and shoved me aside, nearly knocking my phone out of my hand. "She's clearly having some kind of breakdown," she announced to the crowd. Nick would be devastated to see his best friend acting like this at his memorial. Max jumped up from his merchandise table, hoodies scattered everywhere as he rushed toward the stage. Megan stopped her livestream and started frantically typing on her phone. Within minutes, my social media exploded with notifications. Screenshots of my meltdown were already circulating with captions like "Attention Seeker, Ruins, Memorial and Jealous Friend Can't Handle Grief." I ran to my car, hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys. Marcus texted asking if I was okay, but before I could respond, my phone crashed from the flood of messages. When I finally got it working again, I had over 300 Instagram DMs. Most called me pathetic, selfish, or worse. Someone had already created a TikTok of me reading the blog entries with crying emoji reactions edited over it. The next morning, my mom woke me up looking worried. "Honey, there's something spray painted on our garage door." I didn't need to look to know what it said. The word liar in bright red paint greeted me when I peeked through the curtains. Our Ring camera footage showed 3 figures in hoodies at 3 a.m., but their faces were covered. At school, the hallways parted like the Red Sea when I walked through. Whispers followed me everywhere. My locker had been decorated with printouts of Nick's face and the words, "You unalived him," written in permanent marker across them. I tried to peel them off, but more appeared by lunch. Clara had posted a 40-slide Instagram story, setting the record straight. She claimed I'd been jealous of their friendship with Nick, that I'd tried to isolate him from the group. She even posted old group photos with me cropped out, saying I'd always been possessive and unstable. The post had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments agreeing with her. My other friends started distancing themselves. Sarah, who I'd known since elementary school, wouldn't make eye contact in chemistry class. When I tried to sit at our usual lunch table, everyone suddenly remembered they had library passes. Even teachers looked at me differently after Clara's mom, who worked as a guidance counselor, had private conversations with them about my concerning behavior. I found temporary refuge in the journalism room during lunch, but even that didn't last. Someone had submitted an anonymous tip to the school newspaper about my disruption of a memorial service. They wanted to interview me for a story. I declined and spent the rest of lunch hiding in a bathroom stall, reading the blog entries again on my phone to remind myself I wasn't crazy. Marcus met me after school by the back entrance. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "They got me fired," he said quietly. "Someone called my manager, said I was harassing grieving teenagers, showed them edited screenshots of our texts where it looked like I was manipulating you." We sat in his car for an hour, neither of us knowing what to say. Finally, he pulled out his phone and showed me something that made my blood run cold. Clara had started a GoFundMe for a Nick Memorial Scholarship Fund. It had already raised $8,000. The description talked about supporting students who showed loyalty and compassion, unlike certain people who exploited tragedy for attention. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nick's blog entries, his words about feeling invisible, about the fake friends who only wanted him for rides and money. How had I not seen it when he was alive? The guilt mixed with anger until I couldn't tell them apart. The harassment escalated daily. My college email got flooded with spam after someone posted it in a hate forum dedicated to discussing my crimes. Teachers started calling on me less in class. My guidance counselor suggested I might be happier at another school. Someone even called my part-time job claiming I was unstable and shouldn't work with customers. 2 weeks after the memorial, things got worse. I woke up to hundreds of tags on a video that made me physically sick. Someone had created a deepfake of me laughing while holding a picture of Nick. The caption read, "Caught on camera, her real reaction to his death." It looked disturbingly real. Comments poured in from people who didn't even know us, calling for justice, saying I should be expelled or worse. My parents tried to help, but what could they do? The school said cyberbullying was hard to prove when it was coming from multiple sources. The police said mean comments weren't illegal. A lawyer told us defamation cases were expensive and difficult to win, especially against minors. I started skipping school. What was the point when every day brought new humiliation? But staying home wasn't much better. Delivery drivers gave me strange looks. Neighbors whispered when I walked our dog. The red paint on our garage had been cleaned, but faint traces remained like a scar. Marcus was my only lifeline. We met secretly at a park 2 towns over where no one knew us. He'd lost 15 pounds from stress and barely smiled anymore. I keep thinking about what Nick wrote. He said one day, how he felt invisible. Now we're invisible too, just in a different way. That's when James reached out. Nick's older brother had been watching everything unfold from a distance. His text was simple: "I believe you. We need to talk." We met at a small coffee shop an hour from town. James looked like an older version of Nick. Same dark hair and green eyes, but with deeper worry lines. He pushed a folder across the table. "I found more than just the blog," he said quietly. "Text messages, group chats, everything." They tortured him psychologically for 2 years. The messages were worse than the blog. Casual cruelty disguised as jokes. Plans made in separate group chats specifically excluding Nick. Megan calling him pathetic for caring about his music. Max borrowing money he never intended to pay back. Clara screenshotting his vulnerable messages to mock with others. "I wanted to come forward earlier," James continued, "but my parents, they can't handle any more pain. This is unaliving them slowly." He showed us more evidence. Venmo transactions showing Nick constantly paying for everyone. Calendar screenshots of plans he wasn't invited to. Even voice recordings of them mocking him when they thought he couldn't hear. We spent hours going through everything. James had been meticulous, organizing 2 years of digital cruelty into neat folders, but the most damning evidence was a video from 3 weeks before Nick's death. Someone had secretly recorded him confronting the group about feeling excluded. Their response was to laugh and call him dramatic. Clara's voice was clearest. "God, you're so sensitive. Maybe if you weren't such a downer all the time." I wanted to post everything immediately, but James stopped me. "They'll spin it like they did before. We need to be strategic." He was right. Clara had already proven she could control the narrative. We needed something bigger. That's when Marcus remembered the GoFundMe. What if the money isn't going where she says? We did some digging. The scholarship fund Clara advertised, it didn't exist. The school had no record of it. The money was going directly to Clara's personal account. She'd been posting about administrative costs and memorial expenses, but also mysteriously had new designer clothes and the latest iPhone. We screenshot everything. Every transaction, every lie about where the money was going. James even found posts where she was selling memorial merchandise that was just cheap items from wholesale websites marked up 400%. She was literally profiting off Nick's death while destroying anyone who questioned her. But when I tried to post the evidence, I discovered Clara had been busy. My Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter had all been banned for harassment and bullying. She'd organized mass reporting campaigns against me. Every time I made a new account, it was banned within hours. I was effectively silenced on every platform where people might see the truth. The situation at school became unbearable. Someone had submitted fake screenshots to college admissions offices claiming I was a bully who drove a student to self-harm. My early acceptance to State University was suddenly under review. My grades were slipping because teachers kept losing my assignments. Clara's mom had convinced the administration I was a disruption to the learning environment. One particularly bad day, I was cornered in the hallway by Megan and her friends. "You know what's really sad?" she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Nick told us you were obsessed with him. Like creepy obsessed. He was actually scared of you near the end." I knew it was a lie, but the crowd gathering around us didn't. They just saw me standing there, shaking, unable to defend myself. When I tried to walk away, someone accidentally spilled their drink on me. When I went to the bathroom to clean up, someone had written "Nick Killer" on the mirror in lipstick. That night, I finally broke down completely. My parents found me on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. They wanted to take me to the hospital, but I begged them not to. I could already imagine how Clara would spin that. Guilty conscience leads to mental breakdown. Marcus wasn't doing much better. He'd been blacklisted from every job in town after the rumors spread. His own family was starting to doubt him. "Maybe you misunderstood," his mom had said. "Those kids seem so nice on social media." We were losing. Despite having all the evidence, we couldn't get it out there. Every avenue was blocked. Clara's narrative was the only one people saw. Nick's truth was buried under layers of lies and manipulation. Then came the turning point we'd been waiting for. There was another memorial event, this time at school. Clara had convinced the administration to let her organize an assembly. Attendance was mandatory. She'd prepared a whole presentation about celebrating Nick's life and moving forward together. What she didn't know was that James had been talking to his parents. Slowly, carefully, he'd been showing them Nick's blog. It broke them all over again. But this time their grief mixed with anger. They'd been led to believe their son's friends had loved him, that I was the problem. Learning the truth changed everything. The assembly was packed. Clara stood at the podium in a black dress that probably cost more than Nick ever spent on himself, talking about friendship and loyalty. Behind her, a slideshow played happy group photos, all carefully curated to support her narrative. I sat in the back, Marcus beside me, both of us silent. Then the doors opened. Nick's parents walked in with James. The principal tried to intercept them, but Nick's father just said, "We're his parents. We have a right to speak at our son's memorial." Clara's face went pale, but she tried to play it cool. "Of course, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Would you like to say a few words?" She probably thought they'd thank her for organizing everything. Maybe cry a little. She had no idea what was coming. Nick's mother took the microphone. Her hands were steady, but her voice shook. "We've recently learned some things about our son's final months. Things that change everything we thought we knew." She pulled out a stack of papers, Nick's blog entries. "These are our son's words, his truth, and we think everyone should hear them." She began reading. The assembly was dead silent except for her voice, strong and clear, reading Nick's pain aloud. How he felt used. How he knew they talked about him behind his back. How he paid for everything but was never really included. How he thought about ending the friendship but didn't know how to be alone. With each entry, the room grew more uncomfortable. I saw Max sink lower in his seat. Megan was frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to do damage control, but Clara looked furious. She actually tried to grab the microphone, saying something about this being inappropriate and hurtful to Nick's memory. Nick's father stepped forward then. He was a quiet man normally, but his voice boomed through the gymnasium. "You want to talk about hurtful? How about profiting off my son's death?" He held up his phone, showing the GoFundMe page. $8,000 raised for a scholarship that doesn't exist. "Where's that money, Clara?" The principal finally intervened, trying to end the assembly, but it was too late. Students were already pulling out their phones, looking up the GoFundMe, searching for the scholarship information. The truth was spreading faster than Clara could contain it, but the real blow came when Nick's mother turned to me. "In front of everyone," she said, "I owe you an apology. I blamed you for not saving him, but you were the only real friend he had. You tried to show us the truth and we didn't listen. I'm sorry." She hugged me right there on stage and I completely broke down. Months of pain and isolation came pouring out. When I finally looked up, half the assembly was crying too. The other half was staring at Clara, Max, and Megan with disgust. The aftermath was swift. The GoFundMe was investigated and shut down for fraud. Clara had to return every penny, though she'd already spent thousands. The school revoked her student council position and banned her from organizing any more events. When college admissions boards learned about the fraud, her acceptance letters started turning into rejections. Max lost his football scholarship when coaches saw evidence of his bullying. Turns out universities don't want players who psychologically torture their teammates. His parents had to pay back everyone Nick had loaned money to, which was substantial. Megan's family moved within a month. The shame was too much for her mother, who was on the PTA and had defended her daughter fiercely. Before they left, Megan posted one last video, a tearful apology that felt more like self-pity than genuine remorse. The memorial Instagram page was reported and removed for violating terms of service. All those followers, all that influence, gone overnight. Clara tried to start new accounts, but now she was the one getting mass reported. She learned what it felt like to be silenced and helpless. My college acceptance was reinstated after the truth came out. The admissions board actually called to apologize personally. My grades recovered when teachers realized they'd been misled. The vandalism stopped and people began approaching me to share their own stories about the group's cruelty. But the best outcome was what James, Marcus, and I built together. We started a real support group for grieving teens, one that focused on genuine connection and mental health resources. No social media, no merchandise, just a safe space for people who were struggling. We called it Nick's Place and it was everything the fake memorial wasn't. Nick's parents became advocates for anti-bullying programs, sharing their son's story at schools across the state. They always emphasized that the worst bullying isn't always physical, that psychological torture can be just as deadly. They saved lives by speaking out. As for me, I still carry the guilt. I still wish I'd seen the signs earlier, stood up to the group while Nick was alive, but I've learned that grief isn't performative. It's not about Instagram posts or memorial merchandise. It's about honoring someone's truth even when it's uncomfortable. The last time I visited Nick's grave, it was covered in fresh flowers from people who'd never met him but understood his pain. No staged photos, no social media documentation, just quiet recognition of a life that mattered. Justice didn't come through dramatic confrontation or revenge. It came through truth being revealed and believed. The bullies faced real consequences, lost opportunities, damaged reputations, and the knowledge that everyone knew what they'd done. They learned that exploiting someone's death for personal gain has a price. And somewhere, I hope Nick knows that his truth finally mattered more than their lies. The weeks following the assembly should have been peaceful, but Clara wasn't done. She might have lost her public platform, but she still had connections, and she used every single one of them. The sign of trouble came when I received an official letter from the school board. They were launching an investigation into my disruptive behavior at school events. Clara's mother had filed a formal complaint claiming I'd caused emotional distress to grieving students. Marcus got his own letter the same day. His was worse, a cease and desist order from Clara's family lawyer, accusing him of stalking and harassment. The letter threatened legal action if he continued spreading defamatory content about their daughter. We both knew it was baseless, but fighting it would cost money neither of us had. James called an emergency meeting at his apartment. He looked exhausted, papers scattered across his coffee table. "They're not giving up," he said, showing us printed emails. Clara had been reaching out to news outlets, trying to spin the story as a case of cyberbullying against her. She'd even created a fake blog, backdated to make it look like Nick had written positive things about the friend group. The fake blog was sophisticated. She'd studied Nick's writing style, copied his humor, even included inside jokes only the group would know. If someone stumbled across it without context, they'd believe Nick had loved his friends and that we'd fabricated evidence against them. She was rewriting history while we watched. My parents hired a lawyer, draining their savings in the process. The lawyer, Mrs. Chen, was blunt about our chances. "They're minors with clean records and good grades. You expose them publicly." Even with evidence, Juries sympathize with young people who claim they're being bullied. She advised us to stay quiet and let things blow over. But staying quiet wasn't an option when Clara escalated further. She created anonymous accounts to message students from neighboring schools claiming I was dangerous. The messages included carefully edited screenshots from Nick's blog, rearranged to make it seem like he'd been afraid of me. Soon, I was getting hostile messages from complete strangers. The school board investigation dragged on for weeks. I had to miss classes for interviews where they questioned every interaction I'd had with Clara's group. They asked why I'd chosen such a public venue to share the blog entries, why I hadn't gone through proper channels, whether I'd considered the emotional impact on other grieving students. During one particularly grueling session, the board presented new evidence, a series of text messages between Nick and Clara where he supposedly called me suffocating and obsessive. My lawyer immediately spotted inconsistencies in the formatting, but proving they were fake would require expensive digital forensics. Marcus faced his own battles. The cease and desist had scared away potential employers who didn't want legal trouble. He applied for jobs in neighboring towns, but somehow word always got there. One manager told him straight out, "We heard you were involved in some harassment case. We can't take the risk." James discovered Clara had been busier than we thought. She'd reached out to Nick's extended family, cousins and aunts who lived out of state, feeding them her version of events. She painted herself as Nick's closest friend, trying to preserve his memory while unstable individuals attacked her. Some relatives believed her and started pressuring Nick's parents to stop the vendetta. The stress began affecting Nick's parents' marriage. His mother wanted to keep fighting to ensure their son's truth was heard. His father, worn down by family pressure and legal threats, wanted to move on. James found himself mediating between them while dealing with his own grief and anger. Then Clara made a mistake. In her eagerness to discredit us, she posted a tribute video to Nick on a new platform she thought we weren't monitoring. The video included footage from parties and gatherings, showing happy moments between Nick and the group. But Marcus noticed something Clara had missed. In the background of one clip, you could hear Max and Megan mocking Nick's outfit while he was in another room. We had them discussing their cruelty on camera, but when we tried to share it, we hit another wall. Clara's family had hired a reputation management firm. Every time we posted evidence, it was buried under a flood of positive content about Clara. Search her name and you'd find dozens of articles about her charity work, her academic achievements, her brave stand against cyberbullying. The firm also worked to discredit us. Suddenly, old social media posts were taken out of context. A joke I'd made years ago about skipping school became evidence of my delinquent behavior. A photo of Marcus at a party became proof of his unstable lifestyle. They were building a narrative that we were troubled teens jealous of successful students. My mental health deteriorated rapidly. I started having panic attacks in public, terrified of running into Clara's supporters. My grades, which had started recovering, plummeted again. My parents discussed homeschooling, but we couldn't afford it with the legal bills piling up. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. The voice was disguised, but the message was clear. "Drop this or things get worse. We know where you work. We know your schedule. Nick's gone and you can be too." I recorded the call and took it to the police, but they said without proof of who made it, they couldn't do anything. The threats escalated. My car tires were slashed in the school parking lot. Marcus found a dead bird in his mailbox. James received photos of himself taken from a distance showing someone had been following him. We were being watched, stalked, terrorized into silence. Clara's group had reformed, stronger and more vicious than before. They'd learned from their mistakes, operating through proxies and anonymous accounts. New members joined. Drawn by Clara's narrative of being a victim fighting back against bullies, they called themselves Nick's real friends and made it their mission to destroy us. The school board finally reached a decision. I was suspended pending further investigation. They cited the ongoing disruption my presence caused. Clara's mother had convinced them that other students felt unsafe with me around. I was banned from campus, forced to complete assignments from home. My isolation was complete. Friends who'd started reaching out after the assembly pulled back when the suspension was announced. Nobody wanted to be associated with the girl who'd been officially labeled a troublemaker. Even Sarah, who'd known me since we were 6, blocked my number after her parents told her to stay away. Marcus and I met at increasingly obscure locations, paranoid about being followed. We'd become exactly what Clara painted us as: isolated, paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere. The difference was our enemies were real. Every day brought new evidence of their campaign against us. James made a difficult decision. To protect his parents from further pain, he publicly announced he was stepping back from the situation. Privately, he continued gathering evidence, but he couldn't be seen with us anymore. We understood, but losing our strongest ally hurt deeply. Then came the lawsuit. Clara's family filed a civil suit against me for defamation, emotional distress, and harassment. They demanded damages that would bankrupt my family. The lawsuit meant depositions, court dates, and more legal fees we couldn't afford. My parents took out a mortgage on our house. During my deposition, Clara's lawyer twisted everything. My grief became obsession. My attempt to share Nick's truth became a malicious attack. They presented character witnesses, teachers and students who testified about Clara's kindness and leadership. They painted a picture of a golden girl tormented by a jealous classmate, but we had an ace up our sleeve. Mrs. Chen had been quietly building our case, and she'd found something Clara's team missed. The reputation management firm Clara's family hired had made a crucial error. In their zeal to create positive content, they'd accidentally included metadata proving the fake blog posts were created after Nick's death, not before. We also had new allies. Other students who'd been bullied by Clara's group started coming forward, emboldened by our fight. They shared their own stories of exclusion, mockery, and manipulation. A pattern emerged of Clara targeting anyone who threatened her social dominance. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Megan, racked with guilt and tired of running, reached out through her lawyer. Unexpected source. Megan, racked with guilt and tired of running, reached out through her lawyer. She was willing to testify about what really happened, to admit their treatment of Nick in exchange for immunity from the fraud charges. Clara had pushed her too far, threatening to ruin her family's new life if she didn't stay silent. Megan's testimony was devastating to Clara's case. She detailed how they'd systematically excluded Nick, used him for money and rides, mocked him behind his back. She confirmed the blog entries were real, that Nick had confronted them about his treatment. She even admitted to helping create the fake evidence against me. But Clara had one more card to play. The night before a crucial hearing, my laptop was stolen from my car. It contained all our evidence, our communications with lawyers, everything. Without it, we'd have to start from scratch. Security footage showed a figure in black breaking into my car, but their face was covered. Marcus worked through the night to reconstruct what we'd lost. He'd been paranoid enough to back up everything to multiple cloud services. By morning, we had most of our evidence restored, but the message was clear. They were watching our every move, ready to strike at any moment. The hearing was a battlefield. Clara's lawyer presented their case with theatrical flair, portraying her as a grieving friend trying to honor Nick's memory. Our lawyer methodically dismantled their arguments, presenting evidence of the fake blog, the fraudulent fundraiser, the orchestrated harassment campaign. The judge seemed skeptical of both sides until James made a surprise appearance. He'd been subpoenaed by Clara's team, thinking he'd support their case. Instead, he calmly presented a USB drive containing every piece of evidence we'd gathered, including audio recordings of Clara discussing her plans to discredit us. The courtroom erupted. Clara's lawyer objected, claiming the evidence was obtained illegally. Our lawyer countered that it was all from public sources or freely given by witnesses. The judge called a recess to review everything, leaving us in agonizing suspense. During the break, Clara cornered me in the bathroom. For the time since this began, we were alone. Her perfect facade cracked, revealing the fury underneath. "You ruined everything," she hissed. Nick was nothing before I made him popular. He should have been grateful. I recorded her confession on my phone, her admission that she'd never cared about Nick, only about the image of being a caring friend. She detailed how she'd planned the memorial events for attention, how the fundraiser was always meant to benefit her. She was so angry, so confident in her victory that she didn't notice the red recording light. When court resumed, I passed my phone to Mrs. Chen. The judge allowed the recording as evidence, and Clara's own words destroyed her case. Her lawyer tried to argue it was taken under duress, but the damage was done. Everyone heard her real feelings about Nick, her calculated cruelty. The judge dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice, meaning Clara's family couldn't refile. He also recommended criminal investigation into the fraud and harassment. Clara's parents, realizing the extent of their daughter's actions, withdrew their support. The reputation management firm dropped them as clients, but our victory came at a cost. My family was deep in debt from legal fees. I'd missed so much school that graduating on time was uncertain. The trauma of months of harassment had left deep scars. Marcus still struggled to find work, his reputation damaged by association. Nick's parents divorced, unable to bridge the gap the ordeal had created. His mother threw herself into advocacy work, traveling constantly to avoid dealing with her grief. His father retreated into silence, moving to another state to start over. James tried to hold the family together, but eventually had to focus on his own healing. The criminal investigation moved slowly. Clara's family hired new lawyers, fighting every charge. Max and others involved in the harassment claimed they were manipulated by Clara, turning against her to save themselves. The friend group that had tormented Nick imploded in a mess of accusations and betrayals. Some justice came through unofficial channels. Clara's college prospects were destroyed. No school wanted the liability she represented. She became a cautionary tale in our community about the dangers of social media manipulation and false grief. Her family eventually moved, unable to escape the shame. Max lost more than his scholarship. His bullying of Nick became widely known and former teammates came forward with their own stories of his cruelty. He went from golden boy to pariah, working minimum wage jobs while his former friends went to college. Megan's testimony earned her some redemption, but the guilt ate her. She started therapy, genuinely working to understand how she'd become someone who could torment a supposed friend. Her family struggled in their new town, the past following them despite the distance. As the one-year anniversary of the assembly approached, I reflected on everything that had happened. The truth had prevailed, but at enormous cost. Nick's story was known, his pain acknowledged, but it couldn't bring him back. Justice felt hollow compared to the loss. Marcus and I remained close, bonded by shared trauma. We continued running Nick's Place, the support group growing as more teens found the courage to share their struggles. We implemented strict no-phone policies, creating genuine safe spaces free from social media performance. James channeled his anger into action, studying law with plans to help families like ours who faced systematic harassment. He kept Nick's real blog online, a permanent testament to his brother's truth. The site became a resource for recognizing and addressing psychological bullying. My suspension was lifted after the lawsuit's dismissal, but returning to school felt impossible. I finished my senior year through online classes, avoiding the hallways where so much pain had occurred. College became a fresh start, a place where nobody knew my story. The deepest wound was the knowledge that it all could have been prevented. If we'd recognized the signs of Nick's suffering, if we'd stood up to the bullying while he was alive, if the adults had listened instead of enabling Clara's manipulation, the what-ifs haunted me more than any harassment. But from the ashes came purpose. Nick's story, as painful as it was, opened eyes to the reality of psychological abuse among teens. Schools implemented new policies about memorial events and fundraising. Parents became more aware of the signs of exclusion and manipulation. Clara tried one last manipulation, posting a lengthy apology video that went viral. She claimed she'd been caught up in grief, that her actions came from a place of pain. Some people bought it, commenting about forgiveness and chances, but those who knew the truth saw it for what it was, another performance. The video backfired when other victims of her bullying responded with their own stories. A former friend revealed how Clara had sabotaged her college applications. A classmate shared recordings of Clara planning to humiliate her at prom. The pattern of cruelty spanning years became undeniable. The video's comment section became a battlefield. Clara's remaining supporters fought viciously against the flood of new testimonies, but they were outnumbered. Within hours, her carefully crafted image crumbled completely. Her parents' business started receiving one-star reviews mentioning their daughter's behavior. They had to disable their company's social media accounts. I watched it all unfold from my bedroom, feeling nothing. Marcus called to tell me Clara had been spotted at the grocery store wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, practically running from other shoppers who recognized her. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt empty. The criminal investigation finally gained momentum when a detective named Victoria contacted us. She'd been assigned to the fraud case and needed our evidence organized chronologically. James, Marcus, and I spent days in her office walking through timelines and providing documentation. She seemed genuinely disturbed by what Clara's group had done. During one session, Victoria mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Clara had been caught trying to access Nick's old social media accounts. She'd been attempting to delete old messages and posts that contradicted her narrative. Fortunately, the platforms had already preserved everything for the investigation. The prosecutor decided to pursue charges for fraud, harassment, and identity theft. Clara's new lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in leniency. Too many people had been hurt, too much money stolen under false pretenses. Max cracked facing his own charges. He agreed to testify against Clara in exchange for community service. He admitted to helping vandalize my property and spreading the false rumors about me being dangerous. His testimony revealed Clara had promised him a cut of the GoFundMe money for his loyalty. The trial date was set for 3 months out. Clara's family tried one last manipulation. They offered to pay my family's legal debts if we dropped everything. My parents were tempted, drowning in bills as they were, but I couldn't let Nick's truth be buried again for money. Mrs. Chen connected us with a victims' rights organization that helped with expenses. They'd been following the case and wanted to use it as an example of memorial fraud. Suddenly, we weren't fighting alone anymore. Clara made bail but had to wear an ankle monitor. Someone spotted her at a drive-thru and posted about it, noting how she'd gone from organizing memorial events to being under house arrest. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone. Marcus finally found work at a warehouse 2 towns over. The manager there hadn't heard about the drama and just needed reliable workers. It wasn't much, but it was something. He started saving every penny, determined to rebuild his life. James graduated from law school early, throwing himself into his studies to cope. He chose to specialize in fraud and harassment cases inspired by what we'd endured. His case after passing the bar was helping another family whose child's death had been exploited for profit. The trial arrived faster than expected. The courthouse was packed with reporters, students, and community members who'd followed the saga. Clara entered wearing a conservative suit, trying to look young and innocent, but everyone had seen her true face in that bathroom recording. Her defense attorney tried to paint her as a grieving teenager who made mistakes. They brought up her academic achievements, her volunteer work, her previously spotless record, but the prosecutor systematically destroyed each argument with evidence we'd provided. When I took the stand, Clara stared at me with pure hatred. I detailed the harassment, the vandalism, the threats. I played the recording of her confession. Her attorney objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed it all. The truth couldn't be silenced anymore. Nick's mother testified about the pain of discovering her son's friends had tormented him. She broke down describing how Clara had comforted her at the funeral while secretly planning to profit from Nick's death. Several jurors were visibly affected by her testimony. The most damaging testimony came from Clara's former friend Benji, who'd been part of the inner circle. He revealed Clara had a history of targeting vulnerable people, documenting years of similar behavior. She destroyed friendships, sabotaged relationships, always playing the victim when confronted. Clara's parents sat in the gallery looking shell-shocked. They believed their daughter's lies completely, enabling her behavior for years. When evidence of the fraud was presented, showing exactly how she'd spent the memorial funds, her mother left the courtroom in tears. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Clara's face went white as the verdict was read. She'd been so certain she could manipulate her way out of consequences, but reality finally caught up with her. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. The judge ordered a pre-sentencing investigation to determine appropriate punishment. Clara remained on house arrest. Her social media presence finally, completely silenced. The community's reaction was mixed. Some felt justice had been served. Others thought we'd gone too far in pursuing criminal charges against a teenager, but most people just seemed relieved the drama was over. My college acceptance was formally reinstated with a personal apology from the admissions director. They offered me additional financial aid, recognizing the hardship I'd endured. I accepted, eager for a fresh start away from everything. Marcus decided to move too. He'd saved enough for a security deposit on a small apartment near his warehouse job. We helped him pack, both of us ready to leave the town that had become a battlefield. Before leaving, I visited Nick's grave one more time. Fresh flowers covered the headstone, not staged memorial bouquets, but simple wildflowers from people who genuinely cared. I left my own contribution, a printed copy of his favorite song lyrics. The sentencing hearing revealed Clara's complete lack of remorse. She read a prepared statement blaming everyone but herself. The judge wasn't impressed. She received 2 years in a juvenile facility, 3 years probation, and was ordered to pay full restitution. Her parents' business never recovered. They sold their house to pay legal fees and restitution, moving to another state for a fresh start. The last anyone heard, they were in therapy, trying to understand how they'd raise someone capable of such cruelty. Max completed his community service at a local mental health facility. The experience changed him, forcing him to confront the damage bullying causes. He wrote a letter apologizing to Nick's family, though they chose not to respond. Megan continued therapy and eventually reached out to apologize personally. Her remorse seemed genuine, unlike Clara's performance. She was working at a crisis hotline, trying to help others who felt invisible like Nick had. The memorial fund money was recovered and donated to legitimate mental health organizations in Nick's name. The school implemented strict policies about memorial events and fundraising, requiring administrative oversight to prevent future exploitation. Local news covered the case's conclusion, focusing on the dangers of social media manipulation and false grief. Several schools invited Nick's mother to speak about recognizing signs of bullying and the importance of genuine friendship. My last week in town was surprisingly peaceful. People who'd shunned me during the harassment campaign approached with quiet apologies. Sarah even unblocked my number, sending a long text about how sorry she was for abandoning me. The moving truck arrived on a Thursday morning. My parents had decided to relocate too, the house holding too many bad memories. As we loaded boxes, neighbors watched from windows, the same ones who'd whispered about me for months. Marcus stopped by to say goodbye. We'd been through hell together, bonded by trauma and determination to see justice done. He promised to visit once we were both settled in our new lives. James sent a text with a photo of Nick's blog, now preserved permanently online with resources for bullying victims. The site received thousands of visits daily from teens experiencing similar exclusion and cruelty. The drive to college felt like emerging from a nightmare. Each mile put distance between me and the worst year of my life, but I carried Nick's memory with me. Not the false narrative Clara created, but his true story of pain and isolation. My dorm room was small but mine. No one here knew about the trial, the harassment, the memorial drama. I could just be a regular freshman, starting over with hard-won wisdom about fake friends and real grief. The week of classes, I noticed a girl sitting alone in the cafeteria, scrolling through her phone while others chatted around her. Something in her posture reminded me of Nick. I sat down across from her and introduced myself. We talked for hours about classes, homesickness, and adjusting to college life. She mentioned feeling invisible in her high school friend group, always on the periphery. I listened, really listened, the way I wished I'd listened to Nick. Marcus texted updates about his new life. He'd been promoted at the warehouse and was taking night classes. The drama felt like a distant memory, though we both knew the scars would never fully fade. Clara served 8 months before being released to a halfway house. Someone leaked photos of her doing court-ordered community service, picking up trash along the highway. She looked different, hollow, defeated, finally facing consequences. The 1-year anniversary of the trial passed quietly. Nick's parents held a small private gathering at his grave. No social media, no merchandise, just people who genuinely loved him sharing memories and grief. I started volunteering at my college's peer support center, trained to recognize signs of distress in other students. Every conversation reminded me that everyone carries hidden pain, that popularity often masks deep loneliness. James won his major case, helping a family whose daughter's sewers lied had been exploited by classmates selling memorial merchandise. He cited our case as precedent, slowly building legal protections against grief profiteering. Life moved forward in small, ordinary ways. I made real friends who knew my story but didn't define me by it. Marcus found love with a coworker who appreciated his loyalty and strength. Even Megan seemed to be building a better life, far from Clara's influence. The last I heard, Clara was working at a fast food restaurant, her dreams of influence and popularity crushed by her own cruelty. Her former followers had long since moved on, pretending they'd never participated in her schemes. Nick's truth lived on through the website, the support groups, and the lives touched by his story. Not the sanitized version Clara tried to sell, but the real, painful truth about feeling invisible among supposed friends. His death sparked changes that might save others from similar pain. I graduated with honors, my thesis examining social media's role in grief exploitation. The dedication read simply, "For Nick whose truth deserved to be heard." It felt like the most honest thing I'd ever written.